No uniform, no rank, no past anyone could verify. She walked into Fort Darby's Defense Advanced Ballistic School without a word and within a week had quietly demolished every marksmanship record on file. Some thought she was a fluke. Others whispered she was cheating. A few wondered if she was even real, until Colonel Morrison placed a single .50 caliber round in her palm and cleared her for range 12. The impossible shot. The one that breaks careers and legends alike. What happened next? No one was ready for. Not even her. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching this from, and what's the most powerful story of redemption you've ever heard. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. Under the pale Wyoming sky, the bus hissed to a stop beside the perimeter fence of Fort Darby. Dust spun in loose spirals as the door folded open. A single figure stepped off, no duffel bag, no insignia. Just a compact woman in muted gray, her dark blonde hair tied in a simple knot, and a clipboard clutched under one arm. No one paid her much attention. Dozens of others were unloading gear, joking, shouting over the wind. New intakes for the Defense Advanced Ballistic School came in all shapes, but this one no visible rank. No welcome officer slid past them like fog over gravel. She walked up to the main admin tent and waited her turn behind a trio of Marines arguing over housing assignments. When the clerk looked up and asked for ID, she handed over a printed form with her name typed neatly across the top, Elena Korhonen. The clerk frowned. "Where's your transfer, Doc?" "There is none," she said. Her accent was clipped. "Northern. I'm civilian. Contractor path." That earned a glance over the top of his monitor. "Civilians don't usually qualify for this program. I scored 98 on the composite." The man leaned back. "You'll need to verify that with command." "I already did." Before he could argue further, a voice barked from outside the tent. Clerk Commander Reese Callahan ducked inside, brushing grit from his vest. He spotted the exchange, took one look at the sheet in Elena's hand, and snatched it. "Korhonen," he muttered. Then louder, to the clerk. "She's on the provisional list. Let her through." Elena gave a single nod of thanks and moved on without another word. The clerk blinked. "Who the hell is she?" Callahan didn't answer, but as Elena walked across the compound toward the barracks, he tapped a message into his comm. "Morrison, she's here. Real quiet. Just like you said." Colonel Avery Morrison stood at the edge of range 6, watching the silhouettes of instructors pace between tripods. He didn't look up as Callahan approached. "She doesn't belong here," Morrison said flatly. "No military record, no ops file. Came in under the civilian slot with a finished passport and a waiver signed by DOD R&D. Callahan handed him a manila folder. "Provisional clearance from Quantico, Ballistics Research Division. Her scores are off the charts." "I don't trust charts," Morrison muttered. "Neither do I. But I watched her walk in. Didn't flinch once." Morrison exhaled slowly. "Keep eyes on her. If she screws up, I want to know before anyone else does." Callahan nodded. "And if she doesn't screw up, then I want to know who the hell she is." By the third day, everyone on base had heard about the quiet foreign girl in Echo Wing. Some thought she was a translator. Others said she was an experimental AI technician who somehow landed in the wrong unit. One rumor claimed she'd worked for NATO. Another that she was the daughter of some retired sniper legend. But Elena didn't speak unless spoken to. She arrived at drills early, left late, and never joined anyone for chow. Her gear was always clean. Her boots were worn but polished. No name tag, no unit patch. Jason Wu, a lieutenant from the 82nd, didn't like it one bit. "You notice how she doesn't blink during check-in?" he asked during lunch, spearing a slice of chicken with his fork. "It's not natural." Sarah Ung rolled her eyes. "Neither is your posture, but nobody's writing memos about it." "I'm just saying," Wu muttered. "She doesn't belong. She didn't serve. This place is for active or prior service, not hobby shooters." Nung raised an eyebrow. "She outscored you on the drone recon exercise because she guessed the terrain pattern?" Wu snapped. Didn't argue. But later that afternoon, she watched Elena adjust her scope mount during a wind calibration drill, and the way her fingers moved, she knew guessing had nothing to do with it. At the end of the first week, Morrison decided to conduct the calibration test himself. The setup was simple: a mixed batch of rifles, standard issue M40s, civilian Remingtons, one vintage L42A1, and randomized scope profiles. Each candidate had to diagnose, zero, and fire at 3 distances with no prior data. Elena's number came up 9th. She stepped forward without hesitation. She didn't choose the Barrett. She didn't even glance at the modern platforms. She walked straight to the rust-patched L42A1. A collective scoff rippled through the group. "She doesn't even know it's bolt action," someone whispered. But Elena opened the chamber, checked the bolt alignment, spun the turrets exactly 4 clicks counterclockwise, and waited for the timer. 3 targets. Morrison called. 400, 800, 1100 yards. "You get 2 minutes." Elena didn't nod. She just exhaled once, then moved. 3 shots, one after another. The first clipped dead center. The second punched through wind shear. The third at 1100 landed a half-inch from center mass. Silence. Morrison leaned toward the spotter beside him. Confirmed. All hits." Jason Wu's jaw clenched. "Must have been lucky." Callahan said nothing, but he was watching Morrison. And Morrison. He was already flipping open a dossier. That night, Callahan approached the mess hall, carrying a report in one hand and a sense of unease in the other. He spotted Elena sitting at a corner table, alone, tray untouched. She was rewrapping a strip of cloth around her right wrist. He paused. "What's with the wrap?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Scar tissue." From what there was a long pause. "Bad win," she said simply. "Wrong calculation. Someone paid for it." Callahan sat across from her, setting the file down between them. "This place doesn't like secrets," he said. "I'm not a secret." "No, but you're something." She didn't answer, but her eyes, pale green, nearly gray, held him for just a second longer than necessary. Then she stood, lifted her tray, and walked out. By the end of week 2, no one was laughing. Elena's calculations weren't just accurate, they were predictive. She anticipated wind shifts before the sensors picked them up. She adjusted for humidity changes based on scent. During a nighttime stress test, she dismantled and reassembled her optic in the dark using only touch, and her first shot rang truer than any of the others. But what unsettled people most wasn't the skill. It was the calm. Even under duress, even with spotlights, noise simulations, countdowns. She didn't breathe harder, didn't frown, didn't speak unless asked directly. Morrison reviewed footage late into the night, frame by frame, looking for patterns, looking for cheats. He found none. The turning point came during the wind tunnel test on Range 4. It was a brutal setup: 6 oscillating fans, multi-angle crosswind, thermal distortions projected via haze generators. The candidate had to adjust in real time, re-zero after each shift, and maintain accuracy. Wu failed. Nung missed her 3rd shot. Callahan came close. Elena. She fired once, then waited. Then fired again, same rhythm. No hesitation. The final shot hit the outer rim of the bullseye. Just shy of perfect. Morrison stepped into the box after she was done. "You've never shot in American ranges before," he said. "No. You adjusted faster than the machine operator." I listened. "To what, the shape of the air?" Morrison frowned. "You can't hear air." Elena turned to face him. "You can, if you stop talking long enough." That night, Morrison called a meeting. "She's not just good," he told Callahan and Sarah Ung. "She's either a savant, or she's hiding something, or both." Callahan said. Ung hesitated. "You think she's dangerous?" "No," Morrison said slowly. "I think she's precise. in a way that usually comes from something broken. He tapped the manila file again. I want to know who trained her and why they let her go. By the time the final evaluation list was posted on the rec hall board, no one was surprised to see her name at the top. Elina Korhonen, range 12 candidate, provisional slot extended, rifle test pending, and below that, in smaller text, 1 shot, 1 mile. Final conditions uncontrolled. Command grade evaluation, live fire. As others gathered around the board, whispering, Elina stood back, silent, and for the first time since she arrived, she allowed herself a small breath. Not relief, preparation. At 0600 sharp, a whistle pierced the fog rolling off the ridgeline. Candidates snapped awake in the pre-dawn chill, boots hitting concrete like synchronized drum beats. The second phase had begun the trials that would break most of them before the week was out. Observation came first. 12 snipers were dropped off one by one along the valley rim and told to locate hidden markers planted miles apart, some camouflaged, others moving. Most took 3 hours. A few found 4 of the 5 markers. Elina finished in 97 minutes. All 5, including the final decoy sewn into the back of a moving goat. She's guessing, Jason Wu muttered, arms crossed at the debrief. Nobody finds the magnetic pin unless they already know where it is. She didn't guess, Sarah Ung replied, scanning the footage. She mirrored flight patterns. Birds were circling. That's how she spotted the movement. Wu scoffed. Oh, sure. Bird whisperer now. No one laughed. Next came disassembly. Under a canvas awning, rifles were stripped down and scrambled bolts swapped, scopes mismatched, mounts reversed. The challenge: identify every piece, reassemble a working rig, fire a 5-round grouping at 400 meters. Most candidates managed 3 or 4. A few forgot firing pins entirely. Elina sat cross-legged, palms open, every piece laid out like a surgeon's tools. She never looked rushed. She didn't blink once during the reassembly. She fired 5 shots, tight cluster, dead center. The evaluator looked up from the scope, stunned. Ma'am, did you adjust the bedding tension? By feel, Elina didn't respond. She was already cleaning her hands with a rag, folding each finger into the cloth like clockwork. The instructors kept recalibrating the difficulty. They introduced variable pressure systems, unpredictable fog bursts, dynamic crosswinds. They randomized elevation charts mid-exercise. They switched reticle types in the middle of drills. She never faltered. While others scribbled ballistics tables, Elina ran numbers in her head. Not scribbled equations, just quiet, precise whispers. You could see her lips move in the spotting mirror before each shot. The rounds flew like they already knew where they were going. Jason Wu couldn't take it anymore. This is rigged, he said during a post-test walkback. She's got help. Somebody's feeding her ranges, or her scope's digital. Callahan raised a brow. Want to prove it? She doesn't even zero her rifle. Wu snapped. She just picks it up and hits. So challenge her, Sarah said flatly, and Jason did. It happened on the impromptu night drill. A miscommunication sent half the candidates to range 8 instead of 9. In the shuffle, Wu approached the instructors, voice raised just enough for others to hear. She won't shoot under real stress. Let's test her. No advanced warning, no spotter, no prep time. The cadre agreed. At 22:30 hours, they called her name over the loudspeaker. Korhonen, range 8. Now. She showed up in 15 seconds. Didn't ask why. Didn't ask what. They handed her an unfamiliar rifle, a Springfield M1A, and told her to adjust for a moving target crossing at 1,300 yards. She looked once through the scope, then fired. The round sliced through the simulated target's shoulder plate mid-motion. The steel clanged. Wu's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She turned, handed the rifle back, and walked off without a word. The next morning, Morrison summoned Callahan to the command hut. You let them ambush her last night, he said coldly. Callahan didn't flinch. She didn't complain. She doesn't complain about anything. Morrison tossed down a folder. These are her full scores from the first 2 weeks. She's top in every category: observation, calibration, terrain analysis, crosswind adaptation, everything, even endurance. Callahan raised a brow. And that bothers you. It confuses me. She's not cheating. We've checked the optics, checked the feed, checked her history. Morrison didn't answer. She just sees the world differently, Callahan said. Maybe, Morrison murmured, or maybe she's seen something the rest of us haven't. The final test before range 12 was the no-win scenario. It was designed to break confidence: one rifle, limited ammo, 5 unknown targets hidden across 2 ridgelines, unpredictable wind, and a 5-minute timer. It was meant to be impossible. The test hadn't been passed in 4 years. Wu scored 2 out of 5. He managed 3. Callahan, an instructor, now turned evaluator, landed 4, but took too long. Elena stepped up, expression unreadable. She scanned the range, looked at the clouds, closed her eyes once, breathed, then she moved. Each shot came within seconds of the last. No second guesses, no corrections. All 5 targets rang steel. Morrison stood frozen behind the observation scope. Callahan leaned forward in his chair, stunned. Wu walked off range without saying a word. Sarah just whispered, "What did we just see?" Later that evening, the names were posted. 10 candidates. Final stage, range 12. Elena Korhonen was the first name on the list. Underneath it, a notation: primary candidate, 1 mile shot, live fire confirmation, no assistance. Callahan stared at the list, then looked up at Morrison. "She's ready." Morrison didn't speak. He just walked toward the control tower, jaw clenched tight, and for the first time since the trials began, it wasn't doubt in his eyes. It was something closer to fear. Under the glow of a low afternoon sun, Morrison stepped out of the watchtower and motioned toward the supply hut. "Korhonen, with me." His voice was calm, but it carried that unspoken gravity, the kind that didn't tolerate avoidance. Elena followed, silent as ever. No questions, no hesitation, just the soft crunch of gravel under her boots. Inside, and the hut was dim and warm, scattered with manuals and ammo crates. Morrison closed the door behind them and turned without ceremony. "I've read your file a dozen times," he said, "and every time, it leaves more questions than answers." Elena stood still. Morrison tapped a folder on the table. "You weren't just a reservist. You weren't just trained. You were part of something off books somewhere in Northern Europe. Small unit, classified op, and then nothing." She didn't respond, didn't even blink. He stepped closer. "You want to keep secrets? Fine. But if I'm going to trust you with range 12, I need more than this ghost act. I need to know who the hell you really are." A long silence passed. Then, finally, Elena spoke. Soft, flat, almost clinical. "I was part of Jaeger North. It was an allied initiative, 3 nations, rotating command. We were trained for forward operations, border sabotage, counter-sniper ops, deep recon in Arctic terrain." Her voice didn't waver, but her hands folded neatly at her sides tightened. "There were 6 of us on a rotation near the Karelia line. We were tracking insurgent supply movements. I made the call to intercept early." Another pause. "They followed my lead. I was the best shot, the youngest, but I missed a movement thermal bloom masked by terrain." She looked down for the first time. "IED. 2 were gone instantly. Another bled out before exfil. I carried the last one to the evac point, but he coded during lift." Morrison didn't interrupt. He just stood, arms folded, watching her peel back the layers. "I was cleared by inquiry. Technically, they called it fog of war. Said it wasn't my fault." Her voice dimmed further. "But the ones who came back treated me like it was. And maybe they were right." Morrison leaned against the desk, jaw set. You could have kept that buried. I tried, she said. But silence follows you. He looked at her more closely now, not the ghostly sniper, not the robotic marksman, but the quiet wreckage beneath all that control. And why the U.S.? He asked. She shrugged faintly. Neutral soil. I needed a place where my name meant nothing, where no one knew the scar on my record. You think a mile shot will erase that? No, she said simply. But I haven't felt a rifle tremble in my hands since that day. Until now. Morrison nodded slowly. You know what range 12 is, don't you? I've read the specs, she replied. Unpredictable wind tunnels, simulated stressors, ballistics distortion from heat refraction. 4 failed attempts in the last 2 years. He chuckled once. Grim. Make that 5. They gave up. They missed. Some by inches. 1 by 2 yards. You don't get a second shot on range 12. You either make it or you go home. Elena didn't flinch. Then I'll make it count. Morrison exhaled, rubbing a hand over the stubble on his chin. You know, a lot of these guys think you're here to prove something. Ego. National pride. Maybe revenge. I'm here, she said, because I walked away from a rifle that still had something left in it. He studied her for a long moment, then finally said, Then do it right. Not for you. For them. She held his gaze and nodded. Once, that night, Callahan found Morrison sitting alone on the firing platform, coat draped over his shoulders, flask untouched beside him. She told you, didn't she? Callahan asked. Morrison didn't turn. Enough. Callahan sat next to him, watching the moon rise over the training field. You believe in redemption, Morrison answered after a beat. I believe some people carry weight better with a rifle than with words. They sat in silence. Down below, Elena walked the gravel path alone, her shadow trailing long across the tarmac. At Wardo 400 the next morning, range 12 lit up. Steel targets were dragged into position, angular, moving, heat-shielded. The range director calibrated the Doppler feeds. Every sensor went online. In the locker room, Elena unzipped her kit bag. Inside was a rebuilt rifle customized to her specs, but regulation-bound, bolt action. 338 Lapua Magnum, 27-inch barrel, non-digital scope. She laid it across her lap like a chapel offering. A small patch was sewn inside the bag, faded, torn. 6 names embroidered in gray thread. She didn't look at it long, just enough to remember. 15 minutes before the test, the other candidates watched from the tower. Sarah Ung whispered, You think she'll do it? Callahan didn't answer. Wu muttered, It's luck. No way she calculates that fast. Maybe, Sarah said. Or maybe she doesn't calculate at all. Elena stepped out onto range 12. The wind hit her like a breath of cold glass, sharp, shifting, unrelenting. She sat up prone. No spotter, no assistance. 1 round. The target was at 1609 meters. Sloped armor, moving track, slight shimmer from rising heat. No one said a word. Elena exhaled, adjusted for wind, counted the seconds between gusts, then pressed the trigger. The round flew, cut the wind like thread, impacted the steel plate dead center. It rang once clean, hard, undeniable. In the tower, Morrison's hand clenched the railing. Clock it, he said. Callahan looked at the readout. Center mass, 0 drift. No one moved. Wu stared, jaw tight. Sarah just exhaled like she'd forgotten how to breathe. Elena stood, didn't look at the tower, didn't raise her hands. She just slung the rifle over her shoulder, turned, and walked off the range. Like it was never about them in the first place. Like it was only ever about finishing something no one else could see. Something still echoing behind her. Under a slate gray sky, range 12 looked like a forgotten battlefield. Cold wind raced across the barren flatland, dragging with it the scent of rust, cordite, and rain-soaked dust. The flags snapped violently, each gust rewriting the rules of engagement. Technicians in weatherproof jackets huddled around monitors, recalibrating systems every few minutes. Crosswinds clocked in at over 20 miles per hour. Temperature drops caused dense air pockets that would throw any shot wide. Even the veteran snipers were muttering because no one could make sense of the wind pattern today. Sarah Ung squinted through her scope, adjusted elevation twice, then fired. The shot hit low over a foot below center. Jason Wu cursed under his breath after his round missed the target entirely. He blamed the fog rolling across the range, but everyone had seen the tremor in his hands. Callahan tracked each attempt from the tower, logging every miss, every margin of error. 6 down, he said. None even close. Morrison stood behind him, silent. His gaze wasn't on the targets. It was on the woman sitting alone at the edge of the prep tent, motionless, calm, like none of this mattered. Elena hadn't spoken all morning. She hadn't even uncased her rifle. While the others tweaked their ballistics apps and reviewed past footage, she just watched. She read the wind by eye, observing how it bent grass at different points downrange, how the fog clung to the metal poles before drifting west. No electronics, no whispering, just her and the terrain. The final shot before her turn cracked through the air and struck 6 inches off to the right. The shooter, a sergeant from the 3rd, lowered his head and walked off without a word. Callahan looked over. We're out of time. Pressure's on. Morrison didn't blink. She knows. Rain started falling sharp, straight lines that hissed on metal. Morrison walked to the prep tent. Korhonen, he said simply. She stood before he finished the word. Not eager, not reluctant, just ready. Inside the control tower, a young officer handed Morrison a standard issue M2010 ESR. He shook his head. No, not this time. He turned to a locked cabinet in the corner. Inside was a Barrett M107A1 black, massive, and perfectly calibrated. 1 round, Morrison said. If she's going to do it, she'll do it with this. Elena approached the firing line slowly, cradling the Barrett like it was a memory. She lay down prone, adjusted nothing, and waited. The target sat 1609 meters away. It was mounted on a moving sled, steel, low profile, with a central core the size of a dinner plate. Crosswinds would bend a .50 caliber round by over 12 inches if miscalculated. Everyone on the range, officers, cadets, contractors, stopped talking. A stillness settled that even the wind couldn't break. She's not using a spotter, someone whispered. No data feed either, said another. Is she crazy? Callahan clenched the rail. Should we give her telemetry? Morrison didn't respond. He was staring at her hands. They didn't shake. They didn't fidget. They simply waited for the wind to blink. Then she shifted her body half an inch, checked the scope once, and pressed her cheek to the stock. Through the scope, the world narrowed. She read the roll of fog as it crossed the second ridge, noted the shimmer in the air above the hot barrel pits to the left. The wind screamed in her ears, but her mind filtered it to silence. She waited. 5 seconds. Then 3 more. Then, like a door had opened, everything aligned. She exhaled and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared like thunder over flat earth. The recoil slammed into her shoulder, but her body absorbed it clean. Callahan's monitor flashed. The round cut through air, bent with wind, rose, dropped, and spun. Then it struck dead center. A single ring echoed across the range like a bell in a cathedral. Silence. Total. Perfect silence. Even the wind seemed to pause. No one moved. Wu's jaw tightened. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Callahan checked the readout again. Impact confirmed. Center plate. 0 deviation. Impossible. The tech behind him whispered. Morrison didn't say a word. He just stepped back from the glass and walked out. Elena stood slowly. She didn't lift the rifle. Didn't look toward the tower. She turned and walked back the way she came, through rain, through silence, through everything that had been waiting to fall apart. Behind her, the steel target still quivered, And everyone watching finally understood she hadn't come to impress. She'd come to end something. Something only she could see. The range was still ringing with silence long after the shot. Not from disbelief, but from something deeper. The kind of stillness that settles when people witness something they weren't prepared to understand. Jason Wu stood stiff beside the watchtower, his face pale. His gear was already half-packed, but he made no move toward the truck. Instead, he approached Morrison with quiet steps and a voice that had lost all its sharpness. "Sir," he said, "requesting withdrawal from the program, effective immediately." Morrison didn't answer at first. He simply nodded. Because truth, when it arrives that clearly, doesn't leave room for argument. Jason wasn't broken, just humbled, and that was enough. Inside the admin office, a thick manila file sat unopened on Morrison's desk. Alina's new clearance papers, a recommendation to commission her as staff-level instructor under special status. Permanent, with title, with authority. Morrison slid it forward as she entered. "Your results from Range 12 have been forwarded to command," he said. "They'd like to make your position official. As of this morning, you're cleared to lead modules in wind sensor integration, high-range ballistics, and optical deviation modeling. We can give you the rank of warrant or civilian grade 4. You choose." Elena didn't sit. She stood by the window, hands folded, eyes on the fog still clinging to the far fields. "I appreciate that," she said quietly, "but I don't need a rank to teach truth." Morrison leaned back in his chair, brow lifting slightly. "You're turning down a command position? Why? Because command implies I'm above someone? I'm not. I just see differently. And I only teach those who want to learn." Word of the shot traveled fast, but not in the way gossip spreads. It moved through command terminals, instructor channels, and training logs. A record of the shot was filed, but without a name, just a code L1201. That afternoon, the usual drills resumed. New trainees arrived, younger than the last batch, some still green from field school. Range 12 was quiet again, but not forgotten. Callahan was giving the new recruits their safety walkthrough when one of the younger cadets pointed toward the side platform. "Who's that A woman knelt beside a disassembled rifle? No badge, no patch, just a gray jacket and gloves stained from oil and graphite. She was adjusting the internal baffles of a compensator, delicate, methodical, precise. No one spoke to her. No one dared interrupt. Callahan simply said, 'That's the reason Range 12 is even open this year.'" The cadet frowned. "What's her name?" Callahan looked at him for a long second, then answered, "You'll learn it. Not because it's told to you, but because one day she'll teach you something that changes everything." Later that week, Sarah Ung walked into the instructor's bay with a question about fog diffusion sensors. She was halfway through her sentence when she stopped. Elena was already running a simulation 3 steps ahead of her inquiry. She handed Sarah the cable spool. No word, just a glance that meant, "Watch this." By the end of the hour, Sarah understood wind like she'd never understood it before. Not as a measurement, but as a living thing. Jason Wu's bunk was empty by then. His request had been granted, but he left a message on the whiteboard in the trainee wing. "She didn't beat us. She revealed us." No one erased it. Morrison kept her file on his desk for 2 more days before finally closing it. No signature, no assignment, just a sticky note he added to the front. "If she ever comes back, don't ask her why. Ask her what comes next." By week's end, Range 12 had resumed its full test cycle. Recruits lined up at the mark. Most couldn't land a hit. One rookie, nervous and sweating, paused after his second miss. "The scope's off," he muttered. A calm voice behind him said, "It's not the scope. It's your spine. You're shifting tension on the brake." He turned. She was standing there, Elena. No uniform, no clipboard, just eyes that had seen too far to be impressed by distance. He blinked. "Are you?" She knelt beside him and adjusted his stance. "Doesn't matter who I am," she said. "You're the one holding the rifle. That evening, the wind came in again hard from the northeast. Alina stood alone on the field, scanning the tree line. No camera crews, no citations, no applause. Just the sky folding into gray and the long breath of someone who had finally let go. She turned, adjusted the sling on her shoulder, and walked off. Behind her, a group of cadets stayed behind after drills. They didn't speak. They just watched her disappear into the mist. One of them young, sharp, unsure, finally said what none of them could name. She doesn't need a title. The others nodded. She is the title.